like sales for me is like relationship. How can I help solve problems and fill needs and things like that? So to me, painting is just a different widget. I can do the relational bit and I can learn the widget itself.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Aleph Ventures TV. Excited for today's episode. I have the one and only Mr. Brandon Stahnke. Brandon, welcome to the pod. How are we doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
So Brandon is a salesman at Paris Painting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. So I'm excited because one of the things that we work really hard at in our businesses with Aleph and Paris as the flagship is when it comes to roles, the core three, we call them, salesperson, project manager, project coordinator. Those are the core building blocks to build these painting businesses. One of the things we're really passionate about is hiring for skill, hiring for character, and creating those, making those roles and supporting those roles such that somebody could come in with those core skills. They don't necessarily need decades and decades in the painting industry to be successful. And I think you've been a phenomenal example of that. And I want to talk to you about your experience of jumping into the painting industry. But so excited about that. And then obviously business owners who have salespeople are going to be hiring salespeople. I want to give them some fodder of here's the experience of somebody who has come into an organization and is selling, et cetera. So I'll lead us down that. Before we get there though, I gotta, when the song Stanky Leg came out, that must have been a very difficult time for you. Maybe we start there.
Traumatizing,
Yeah.
It's, you're opening old wounds, I guess.
Maybe just give us a little bit, like, who are you? Where are you from? Tell us a little bit about who Brandon is.
Sounds good. Grew up in Western Wisconsin, in Hudson, basically considered a suburb of the Twin Cities still. Went to college in St. Paul with some of the Aleph folks, well, Micah specifically, and some of the other guys' wives were part of our core group of friends in college. So, it's fun to really reconnect with those guys and gals just coming back here and join forces. It's been really fun. But I spent post-college, even before that, I in high school, I worked at a bike shop. Cycling's a big passion of mine. So, and then post-college, I graduated at a time it was difficult to find work right after the recession. So I found myself humbled and went back to my high school job as a bike mechanic in a bike shop. But it opened up really an opportunity for, for growth within that industry and set me on, a career in that industry. I worked probably, on and off in that industry for close to 20 years. So it was really fun. Climbed the corporate ladder a little bit, did some business-to-business sales, selling 2 bike shops for a while before this, and then, reconnected with Micah, and here I am. So,
I love it, man.
Yeah.
What was it about cycling? Sell me on cycling. Why should I consider that as like a hobby?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like it's an escape. If you think about as a kid, every kid loves riding a bike, right? And as we get older, as an adult, what are the things that people don't like about riding bikes? It's like hills and headwind, right? But other than that, it's enjoyable. Like people love the perspective it gives you, looking at nature, right? The wind in your hair, just enjoying the outdoors. So there's a lot to love about it, and it's really the feeling of freedom. That feeling of freedom, like you're a kid again. The opportunity you had the first time taking your bike around the block with your parents' permission without them, right? It's like that feeling of freedom. So I think it's relatable and can get a lot of people into it. And now with the introduction of electric bikes, it just eliminates those two challenging variables out of the equation, hills and headwind. If you have a motor assist, like what's not to like, So super fun. But I grew up riding a lot and doing some racing with my dad and stuff like that back in the day. So, yeah.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about, so obviously there's a network element here. You were at a position in life, you're thinking about making a change or whatever. I'd be curious just, maybe how much did you know about the painting industry? How much did you know about what Micah was up to? And I'm just, the thought of going into like a trade business. What was that like?
Yeah.
Just considering that.
It was a little bit challenging, honestly. I was ready for something new. I knew that. I didn't know what the new thing would be. For cycling, it's like you can work in a career that's inside of a passion. Like that was intriguing.
Sure.
And that's why I kind of stuck it out for a long time. Because I get to, sell and talk about, and, even some of the sales trips I did was going to Colorado to go mountain biking. Like, what's not great about that, right? So it was bittersweet leaving, and then stepping into the painting world I knew little to nothing about, was daunting. My father-in-law is a second generation painter. And so my wife has had experience painting with him, and she does all the painting in our house. So I don't touch the paintbrush because I honestly don't enjoy it. So it was like, how am I going to integrate this into like a career, right? But for me, just stepping back, looking at like sales for me is like relationship. It's like, how can I help solve problems and fill needs and things like that? So to me, painting is just a different widget, and other than cycling, right? So, so that's kind of what I fell back on. I was like, I can do the relational bit, and I can learn the widget itself.
Yeah. That's nice. It's nice to have somebody, have some adjacency to the industry. So back in the day, whenever I joined Paris Painting back in 2017, so, Chet had partnered with Jason 6 months prior to whenever I jumped in. I was a financial analyst at Honeywell, corporate or whatever, Fortune 100 company. And man, I tell you, telling people that I was going to the painting industry, and my family even, it's like, are you sure? Like, you're doing what?
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's nice to have that a little bit. So maybe tell me like what were some, even in some of the interview process, getting to know and making this idea of making this jump like real, what were some things that you saw about Paris Painting, maybe about Micah, about the team, that gave you comfort that you could learn the widget, that what your skills could transfer? Tell me about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I trusted Mike already. We had that longstanding friendship. And then just learning about how things are operated. And just knowing there's like clear and defined processes, I think was comforting. And I think a lot of it was just trust, and the fact that I was really ready for a change. I was beyond ready for a change, I think. So, part of it was just, and my wife had been bugging me for years, like, you need to reach out to Micah. Like, you need to see what those guys are up to. And I was putting it off because I was like, but I like bikes, So, I think just the timing lined up. I was super ready, and really now I couldn't be happier. I wish I would have made the switch years sooner, honestly. So it's been great.
So let's I want to talk a little bit about just the experience of like the first 30 days, the first quarter, and maybe just to give some perspective. So when did you start? What was your like first day?
Basically early April 2023.
Yeah. So, and then maybe some stats here, like so 2023 was like your first calendar year, and then now you're coming up in your second. Like, what did you sell your first year? What do you plan to sell this year? Like top line, just total volume. Yeah.
So last year, I forget where I ended exactly, but I think it was around 1.2, 1.3.
Yep.
Somewhere in that zone. And this year I'm on track to exceed 1.6.
Great.
So top line. Yep.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And then maybe I think some of this data is helpful for folks just to contextualize. Like what kind of average job size have you been running? What success rate are you
Hmm.
kind of averaging at? Maybe those two.
Yeah. So this year my AGS is uh, hovering around $6,500, I believe, and my SR currently is like just under 50%.
Nice,
So
dude.
yeah,
There we go. There we go.
yeah.
That's awesome,
Depends on
dude.
the time of the week, It's
Yeah.
like dips below or goes above kind of thing. So, but yeah.
What in 2023, your first calendar year, what did you have in 2023 for a success rate?
Success rate in 2023 overall was, um, I don't recall exactly. I think it was low 40s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I had a,
Yeah, so even getting better, and
yeah.
I think it's helpful to so I mean for us when what we look at as in our model, right, like a mature salesperson that's running good process, they're doing a good job, they should be able to sell about 1.5. They should be able to do that at a success rate kind of in the low 40s, 40 to 45, ideally. If you can improve on that, it's just going to help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the other missing piece, your gross profit, gross margin. What has that percentage been? Maybe 2023, if you remember, and then what 2024 is looking like.
Yeah. 2023, I think it was over 42. This year is I think a little bit lower, but climbing back. So we're targeting to hit, I think around 41, I think is where we're planning to hit the year at end of the year.
And one thing, just as a reminder for folks listening, for Paris and within Aleph, the way that we like to look at gross profit is revenue minus labor and materials and any associated project management costs. So the cost of compensating a project manager, all of their field costs, vehicles, insurance, small tools, et cetera, et cetera. And so just to contextualize, if you were to remove PM and field costs, which is how some people look at it, you'd be at, 46, 47, 48%, up there. So, so that's awesome. And yeah, that kind of trajectory, super exciting. And so, okay, let's go back though. Just getting into it. What was that like to, maybe what was harder than you expected? Maybe let's kind of start there.
Mm-hmm.
Like selling paint jobs.
Yeah. I think I started basically Q2. So like the team they had already hit the ground running. So it took me a couple months to get my feet under me. I felt like, you start bidding high because you're scared of production, and then, you're not winning the jobs, and you course correct, and then, maybe you bid some too low, and then you find the middle, right? So, I think I don't know how I relate to others starting, but I feel like I took a little bit longer to get my base under me and to learn the skills. But once I find those guardrails, like I'm pretty locked in, I feel like. So a challenge was also like I was really proficient in my last job. So stepping back and being really green is hard. It's hard for me. Sure. So it was hard to just get to be okay with that and just to know that some of these skills, the things that can be trained, they take time. All while like learning product, all the technical details, all that stuff, along with a new sales process, it's kind of a lot at once. So yeah, it took a few months to feel like to get through that and get my legs under me, but yeah.
Yeah. What were some of the most helpful parts of, the first 3 to 6 months that you kind of look back at? It's like, gosh, if I didn't have that, if it wasn't structured this way, it would have made that even harder.
Yeah, I mean, having Wallogy and like, I think the estimate builder was like rolled out right before I started. So I'm glad I didn't have to learn an old system and then in turn learn a new system. So it's helpful to have that and just like being told I can trust it and just rely upon it. So I think that was really helpful to have like a metric based system to plug numbers in. And as long as you're accounting for everything, like put the numbers in and it spits your price out basically. So I found that helpful.
Yeah, that makes sense. So for folks that don't know, so we have our own custom software that we've built. It's called Wallogy. We just use it for the businesses that we have ownership in. But there are other softwares that have on the sales side metric-based bidding. But yeah, it's just there's rates, there's production rates, hours, gallons, there's material assumptions. So really, what a salesperson needs to do is punch in square footage, lineal footage, and counts essentially, and the math and the thinking is behind there to put together an accurate bid. Tell me about. Do you remember your first sale?
I do.
Okay.
Micah was with me.
Is it a fun story?
Yeah, I mean, Micah drove basically the whole thing because the client was weird. He was getting notices from the city. The city hall was like basically across the street, so they're staring at his house that needed painting. They're like, "You got to paint this," and so he was forced to paint it. So, but he was pretty grumpy about it. But I say we, but it was mainly Micah because I was like day 2 on the job or something. Yeah,
but I think that's important. Of like. Micah was out in the field with you. Mm-hmm. So maybe talk about that. Like what role did Micah play in the first 3 to 6 months of you getting up to speed?
I think a big role. I mean, he was my trainer, basically taught me how to look at Wallogy. He taught me the entire sales process. And so having him along with was like comforting early on. Like when the bid's in my name, but Micah's there to like make sure I don't just totally screw it up, super helpful. What else?
How much time was like, how frequently was he shoulder to shoulder with you in those first few weeks? What did that rhythm look like?
Yeah, I think there was a fair amount. But at some point he's like, I'm kicking you out of the nest. Just go figure it out, and that was a scary moment too. But I think it's necessary. It's probably the best thing that could happen. Otherwise, you're relying too heavily on someone else to do your work for you. You kind of gotta figure it out once you know how to input things and get measurements and all that stuff. And for me, it was like learning how to bid was like number 1 priority, and then sales process stuff was like that can take a back seat. Worry about that later. Like get your foundation set first, and that's kind of the approach we took, and I think it worked out.
What were things that was there anything that you surprised, like you were surprised by how much it translated from your previous job? Like, I don't know, once you got on job site and you're walking around with customers and you're like, how similar was it? Like in terms of just the sales process? Yeah.
I mean, not a lot. I feel like, the last sales I was in was business to business sales. So there wasn't a lot of in person. It was a lot of phone calls and emails and things. I did get out in the field occasionally. But I think the most relatable or similar thing I would say is just the conversational aspect, like talking about things that aren't necessarily business related, and just getting to know a human. Those are similarities, and those are the things I honestly enjoy because that it sets you up with a foundation to be able to sell with trust in a way. So, yeah.
That totally makes sense. And how much did you have a similar level of like training and coaching and things like that in your previous sales world?
Not really. We did some brought in some nationally recognized sales training curriculums and things, but they're just super different. Part of it is like you got a pretty large sales team, and it's less one-on-one. It's like you're trying to roll out this sales process for an entire team on a team level, basically. Whereas this seems way more one-on-one, and I found it way more helpful. I think it's more dialed in many ways, but one in particular, like just even being here, like having really clear goals and regular check-ins on those, like that was not a thing at my previous role. And it's great. It's like you could take everything like on a yearly level and break it down into bite-sized chunks. Like, what does this $1.5 million sales goal look like on a weekly level? Like, what is the bid activity you need to do this week to be able to hit that target? Like, there was nothing like that before. So just a ton of respect for how well thought out all that stuff is here.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
How about, so you said, I think like a low 40s success rate last year, and then this year trending up to about 50. Tell me about that change. Like, what have you focused on? How have you been able to increase that success rate?
I think following the sales process helps a lot. Obviously it's a proven process. But also like learning more of the technical things helps in that. Like and I think a lot of that just comes with getting repetitions, right? So like where you're able to price anchor. I feel like price anchoring is huge. You can get aligned on price before you break and put the bid together. And if you're not aligned, like you can handle that objection then, as opposed to showing the bid, here's the price, and then there's sticker shock. Like that's never really a good result. So, but yeah, I mean, it took a bit to get there, just learning the whole new, process and industry at large, I guess.
Yeah, totally. What have been some of your, was price anchoring? I think that's a big one. And maybe one that I feel like, so price anchoring, that would be in that category of like a trial close, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so you're, like you said, you're seeing how close you are. I think that's something that every salesperson that goes on an appointment, it's like you wish you would always do that, and then sometimes you don't do it, and you're always like, oh, that's something you never regret doing. Is there anything that you've implemented or used to just be consistent at doing that? Like how I don't know, what have you found helpful to just make sure that you get to that?
I mean, it's just a part of my process. Like I have to say it, and if I don't, I kick myself. Like you said, like if you say it, it's never something you regret doing. So yeah, I just really make it a point because I know that how valuable it is. And the times early on when I haven't done it, like that's when you get the sticker shock and there's no pulling them back really. Because then you're trying to explain why it's that price, but you've already lost them. They're not hearing you at that point. So it's just so valuable that I, make a point to do it every time if I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one thing that is that I think is really, really helpful too, tying this back to, a metric-based bid. So you having confidence in your number is a big component of that, right? So, you said early on, maybe just to validate this, like early on in the first, 3 to 6 months, were you kind of bidding high, just to make sure? Were you doing a bit of that?
Yep.
Yeah. And so, which is good. Some guys will do the other way and then it can get really, really spooky. But, I think a big reason why some people don't do that price anchoring is because they're not confident to price anchor. Right. How do I get to my number? What is this going to be? One, they don't even know what kind of window, maybe to give a price anchor to. And then, like if there's pushback on there, it's kind of like, oh yeah, maybe that was too high. I don't know. Yeah. How have you dealt with just some of that head garbage, just that internal dialogue around the trial close and the price anchor?
I think, exteriors is a bit easier because you've seen 10 houses, you've seen them all basically. So it's easier to formulate that. Interiors is more challenging, I feel like, because each interior space is different. So if I'm unsure, I'll try to like throw out a range. Like I always want to try to lead with price as opposed to asking someone like how much they think it is, because they think you're prying, and then you're going to build your bid around what they say, kind of thing. So,
sure.
If I'm unsure, I'll say, are you in like the $1,000 to $3,000 camp? Are you $3,000 to $5,000 or 5 to 8, 8 to 10, like try to set broad brackets to find out kind of where their budget's at. And then depending on what they answer, you can build the bid around it and put in a ton of options to give them like the perception like, hey, we could hit your price point. We can hit your $5,000 budget. It just might mean we're not doing everything, but here's the option. Here are the options. Here's your add-on pricing if you want us to tackle more. But I think it's a good way to meet them where their pocketbook is, as well as create a ton of value in the same strike of a pen.
So I want to double click on that because I think I've heard this is something that Micah has focused on and the team has focused on this year, as maybe the market has softened a little bit and people are a little bit more price conscious. Mm-hmm. When you said build the bid around that, I know what you don't mean is that you're changing your pricing.
Correct.
Right. So maybe can you just clarify when like building your bid around a budget that works for a customer, like what that means and what that doesn't mean?
Yeah. So like part of it's like finding out what are the true needs and what are things like that aren't really needs. They might be more wants, or things that maybe the client can handle on their own. Like we share some of the workload, right? So like standard stucco house, like they probably don't want to do the body, but there's some door trims and window trims, like lower level stuff maybe they could do. So it'd be putting those, trims in as an option. So it's like, hey, we're here, we could do it for this price. And then it's up to the client, like, is it worth their time, or would they rather, hire it out for $100 or whatever it is, So it's like, get the base bid as low as possible. I think to show like, hey, we're not like super expensive, like we can do this work and it's reasonable, right? So I think there's a psychological effect there, but it's also showing all the options, like here's all the other things, and it allows the client to build their project a la carte in a way. So I think it's super valuable.
I love that. Yeah. So you're not changing how you're bidding individual pieces. Like if one client says, "Oh, I have a budget of $20,000," and another client says, "I have a budget of $2," you're not changing your production rates because you're dealing with somebody with a lower budget. What Correct. You're doing is you're just breaking the scope into more granularity at price points so that they can piece it together, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's huge, man. And I think that's just where that gets back to like what you're doing right there is you're helping them solve a problem, mm-hmm. right? And kind of that's I think that's really what, sales is you're there to help people resolve issues to the degree that you can help them get to a resolution. And getting to a resolution typically means you got to decide to do something or not, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like that decision point. And to the degree that you can be just a resource to get to a decision, to get to a resolution, I think that's that fundamental piece. And that's happening in all kinds of industries. And so finding folks like you that have reps at doing that and just applying it to painting. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what has been something that's like, dude, I love this about being a paint salesperson that I would not have expected that I enjoy it or as much.
Yeah. A lot of things. I mean, just the culture here at the office is super great. Like, leadership values personal life a lot. So there's just freedom in that, I feel like. Also, every day is different. And that's super fun. The days go super fast. The weeks and months go super fast. It's just super refreshing. No one's looking over my shoulder. I'm responsible, obviously, to the company, but I'm also responsible to myself and my own goals that I've set, So it's not like, the repercussions are on me, I feel like, versus someone going to come hammer down on me. So, but it's collaborative too. Like, it's like, what does the business need and what is my need and how can we get those to match? It's just a fun process as opposed to like top down, here's what you're doing, go do it. And there's no really incentive behind it as to why you should do it and things like that.
So I think that's something good to linger on a little bit that is maybe a little bit unique to Olive's culture that has been I think really effective for creating a healthy culture is you owning your own goals. So we're coming up, it's mid-October as we're recording this. We're coming up on starting to plan for next year and put next year's plans together and stuff like that. Um, Maybe just walk through the process of, think back to this time last year, I guess a little bit later, November, December of last year, just how Micah structures it and how it's structured for you to develop your own goals, your own plan. How does that work?
Yeah, I think um, it's kind of backing into things. It's like you could set a $1.5 million goal, but what does that mean daily or weekly or monthly? And so there's systems in place to be able to look at it that way. And like, it might be nice to sell 2 million, but how does that look practically? Do you want to be doing 20 bids a week for 3 months straight? Like, cause that's what is probably needed at this, X AJS, and SR, right? To achieve that. So, to look at it practically is like, and also looking at others historically, like this is what others have done. And so based on what you've done and what others have done, like this is a realistic goal and model to hit. So yeah. I think,
I love that. And that is, so, and even too, there's a financial model, that this fits into, right? So I think that's something that we try to be very transparent of. It's kind of not a secret, of like in Paris's business model, this is kind of how much the company can afford to pay a salesperson, relative to the performance that they bring in or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so kind of here's the model, here's your levers of, all right, if you sell at a higher average job size, that's less jobs you got to sell to get to your goal. If you sell at a higher gross profit, that's less jobs that you need to get produced to get to the gross profit target. Here's your levers, and then you can kind of focus on the skills of how you want to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And how was that for you? Because I feel like in some cases, maybe people look at that as like it's kind of intimidating because it's more on your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, what was that like for you? Like, were there parts that were intimidating, and then were there parts that were more energizing? Like getting into a culture that's like that. How was that transition for you?
Yeah, I think, I didn't know what I didn't know early on. So I was kind of leaning on Micah again to like, hey, what's realistic for a goal target? And because I have no idea what my ability is to do this in this new industry. So I was leaning heavily on him early on. And then, basically it's like, what's your need? How can we make sure your basic needs are met? And then, you could set commission rate based off of that,
Totally. Yeah. That makes sense, man. What are you, kind of looking forward to like for next year? I'd be curious too, I don't know. One of the things I know that's a passion is how does somebody create like a career in sales? I think that I don't know, a sticky culture, it's got to be a place where somebody can come and stay for a while. Like they feel like they can grow and whatnot. And transparent. Like I know less of what those conversations for you have kind of been like, but I know you're starting to like lean into helping with training, other guys and stuff like that. But maybe just speak to some of that, how you're thinking about growing and making it like a longer stay here.
I really enjoy helping people, and just even colleagues. So I think this next year I'll be focusing on more, a little bit more of a leadership role and helping onboard new guys. And I think it's super fun. Like anytime someone can come on a buddy bid with me and I show them how to do things and like help put more framework in place to like, here's where the struggles were for me early on. I wish this was in place, like to be able to help do that and set some guardrails and like give some, some practical, like some tools that I've used and be able to pass that along, I think is fulfilling and gratifying for me. So I'm excited to do that this next year.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Do you have any suggestions? So, I think a number of the folks that would listen to this are going to be owners. And yeah, they, when they look to 2025, they're probably going to have to go, if they want to grow their business, they need to go hire salespeople. Any suggestions to them of, things to, like, how to appeal to high-level salespeople, how to sell to them that, like, the coming to their company, something that they should consider?
Yeah. Yeah, I think some of the skill stuff can be taught. Like, it's the personality type things that you can't really teach, right? So when looking for someone, like, I feel like you want to find someone that fits culturally. But how to draw that in, I don't know. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. For me, it was. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just speaking kind of for you. I think, like, if you think about, all right, if Micah extended an invitation to come to Paris Painting, and Paris Painting, like, what would it need to probably look like for you to be like, I don't think I'm gonna step into that, like. And I guess, you this is your only forte into the painting industry. But I think what I'm driving towards is just, like, things that people, if you want to appeal to talent in the marketplace, it's like, it's not. So I think a lot of people focus on, what can this person come do for me? And they need to focus more on, like, what does the business do for guys like you that would make you want to come here?
Yeah.
So I don't know. If the more of that context, any thoughts on that?
I think what was helpful is, like, early on, even before a formal interview, just hanging out with Micah and him asking, like, what are my basic needs, and see if there's alignment there. Like, if the company can afford what I need to support my family. Right. Obviously, like, money's not the entire picture, but it's a big part of it. If you're not making what you need, like, it doesn't make sense to go to that place of employment, right? So there's been a lot of transparency around that, which I found super helpful. I feel like some companies can be really vague about that until you sign the line, basically. So yeah.
I think that's, and that even ties to a theme of similar how a trial close, being confident in a trial close, you need to be confident in, like, your your numbers. And so you can be confident in that conversation. I think similarly, we're pretty dialed in at how is, like, our business model and our sales model, and how a salesperson is compensated, and what the activity needs to look like, and you need to have this success rate at this average job size and this gross profit. And so we're pretty clear in our numbers, which I think Micah can confidently and honestly tell you, okay, if you want to make this is what that means. Yeah. If you want to make that, that's what that means. And he can accurately, speak to what that reality looks like. I think for a lot of folks, if you don't really track your average job size, or vaguely, or you don't really track your gross profit that consistently, and to the degree that there's ambiguity on those numbers, I think, I don't know. I don't know what success looks like, because I don't track it. So I imagine it's like, Micah's confidence to you of, like, I know what success looks like. I can explain it to you. I can show it to you. That can be really helpful. How about just the element of, like, the team, having a team around you? How has that helped just coming into the industry?
Yeah, a ton. We have a sales team text chat, and we're on it multiple times a day with each other, right? So it's questions like, how would you guys bid this? What product would you use? Things like that. It's great back and forth, great dialogue. Can't always rely on one person like Micah to answer those questions when you're in the field. So to lean on an entire group of folks has been super helpful, especially, like, last year when I was new and didn't know anything. I was texting the chat all the time. And now this year, some of the newer guys are using it pretty heavily for the same purpose. And to be able to chime in and say, hey, this is what I would use and here's why. And I think it's super helpful, super valuable.
That's great. One of the things that we have implemented this year is something called mind melds in the partnerships. So with the 15 different companies that we're partnered with, on Fridays we'll do these mind melds where all the salespeople from different companies will hop on that call. And yeah, I mean, what we're trying to really get after there is kind of that peer to peer, right? If folks in other companies, like if you can build relationships even with salespeople, at other companies, super helpful. I would encourage business owners to think about that. You might have to get creative, but you think about, okay, if I'm hiring a salesperson, what kind of recourse do they have? If they have a question and I'm not available, who can they call? Who can they reach out to? So, if you have a buddy within the PCA and they have a salesperson too, maybe it's like you introduce those two to each other and make sure that there's a little bit of a network that they can ask questions to. That's great. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate your time. Good to have you on. Super fun to, man, the success and the numbers that you're putting out and now, leading and an example. So been fun story. Appreciate you coming on and sharing some. We'll have to have you back on and hear how the numbers keep going up.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thanks, Hogan. Appreciate it.